I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd fall for a scam, especially not one involving a woman young enough to be my granddaughter. For 43 years I taught mathematics at secondary schools across Scotland, prided myself on logic and reason, and never made impulsive decisions. But grief has a way of making even the smartest men do incredibly stupid things. This story still makes me sick to my stomach, and I'm only sharing it because maybe, just maybe, it'll prevent another broken-hearted fool from walking down the same path I did. What happened to me in Thailand cost me £8,000, but there's something much worse than the money I lost that I need to tell you about. My name is James, and until 2 years ago I lived a quiet, predictable life in Edinburgh. I taught at the same grammar school for over 2 decades, lived in the same terraced house since 1987, and was married to Helen for 36 years. We never had children. Helen couldn't conceive, and by the time adoption became an option, we'd settled into a routine of just the two of us. Helen was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in January 2022. 6 months later, she was gone. 40 years of shared breakfasts, evening walks and weekend crossword puzzles just ended. The house felt like a mausoleum. Every room held memories I wasn't ready to face. I took early retirement at 63, sold the house, and did something completely out of character. I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand, not because I'd always dreamed of going there, but because a colleague had mentioned it was cheap, warm, and far enough away that I wouldn't bump into anyone who knew Helen and me as a couple. Looking back now, that decision to run away from my grief instead of processing it properly was the first mistake that led to everything else. But at the time, I thought I was being practical. I ended up in Chiang Mai, thinking it would be quieter than Bangkok or Pattaya. I rented a small apartment near the university district and spent my days wandering temples and coffee shops, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. The loneliness was crushing, but it felt appropriate somehow, like grief was something I needed to carry alone. That's when I saw the advertisement at a local cafe. English tutoring wanted, private lessons for university student. The pay was minimal, but I missed teaching, missed having a purpose. I called the number and arranged to meet this student at a quiet restaurant near the old city. Her name was Nim, and she was 24 years old, studying tourism at Chiang Mai University. She was nothing like the bar girls I'd heard other expats talking about. She was serious, studious, always carrying textbooks and taking careful notes during our lessons. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, and spoke about her studies with genuine passion. Our tutoring sessions started twice a week at various cafes around the city. She was preparing for her final year exams and needed help with business English. I found myself looking forward to these meetings more than I cared to admit. She was intelligent, curious about the world beyond Thailand, and respectful in a way that reminded me of my best students back home. After about a month of lessons, she started asking about my life in Scotland, about Helen, about why I'd come to Thailand. I found myself opening up to this young woman in ways I hadn't with anyone else since Helen's death. She listened with genuine sympathy when I talked about my loss, and slowly our tutoring sessions began including longer conversations about life, loss, and starting over. It was Nim who suggested we meet for dinner instead of just coffee. "You teach me English," she said with a shy smile. "Maybe I teach you about Thai culture." That first dinner at a small family restaurant near her apartment was the first time I genuinely enjoyed myself since Helen's funeral. Over the following weeks, our relationship evolved from teacher-student to something more complicated. She'd text me good morning messages, send photos of interesting things she'd seen around campus, ask my advice about her coursework and her future plans. When she mentioned she was struggling to pay her university fees for the final semester, I offered to help without hesitation. "I can't accept," she said, but I could see the relief in her eyes when I insisted. "Think of it as an investment in your education," I told her. "You're going to do great things." By month 3, we were spending most evenings together. She'd cook simple Thai meals in my apartment, and we'd watch English movies with subtitles so she could practice her comprehension. She started leaving small things at my place. A toothbrush, a change of clothes, textbooks for studying. It felt natural, comfortable, like we were building something real together. I was falling in love with her, and I convinced myself she felt the same way. But there were small things that didn't quite add up, things I chose to ignore because I was so grateful for the companionship. The first significant money request came just before Christmas. Nim's grandmother in her home village of Phayao had fallen ill and needed surgery. The family couldn't afford the hospital bills, and Nim was distraught. "I have to go home," she said, tears streaming down her face, "but I can't miss my exams next month. If I fail, everything I've worked for is gone." I transferred 80,000 baht that same day. It seemed like a reasonable amount for medical expenses, and seeing her relief made me feel useful again, needed in a way I hadn't felt since Helen's illness. But the requests didn't stop there. Her father's motorcycle broke down and he needed it for work. Her younger sister wanted to study at university too, but the family couldn't afford 2 sets of fees. The small restaurant her mother ran needed new equipment to stay competitive. Each story came with photos, with tears, with promises that this would be the last time. And each time I found myself reaching for my wallet because I couldn't bear to see her upset. I told myself I was helping her family, investing in her future, being the kind of man Helen would have been proud of. When Nim started talking about getting a visa to visit Scotland after her graduation, I was thrilled. I began researching the application process, preparing documents, even looking at engagement rings because I'd started imagining a future where we'd split our time between Scotland and Thailand. But things began to feel different between us. She was often distracted during our time together, checking her phone constantly and having hushed conversations in rapid Thai. When I asked about it, she'd say it was family problems or university stress. She'd become less affectionate, more businesslike in our interactions. The tutoring sessions that had brought us together stopped entirely. She said she didn't need them anymore, that her English was good enough now. But we still met regularly, though these meetings increasingly revolved around some new financial crisis that required my immediate attention. I started to feel less like a boyfriend and more like a financial advisor, but I pushed those thoughts away. She was young, stressed about her future, dealing with family pressure I couldn't fully understand. I convinced myself that once she graduated and we could start planning our life together, things would return to normal. The truth came out in the most humiliating way possible. I was at a shopping mall in the Nim Hayman area buying groceries when I heard someone call my name. It was David, a British expat I'd met at a coffee shop a few months earlier. "James, how's the girlfriend situation?" he asked with a knowing smirk. "Sorry?" I replied, confused. "The university girl. Nim, right? She's quite the entrepreneur, that one." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" David looked uncomfortable suddenly, realising I genuinely didn't know what he was talking about. "Mate, she's got at least 3 other guys on the hook that I know of. There's a German pensioner, an American retiree, and some Australian bloke. All of them think they're her boyfriend, all of them sending money for the same sick grandmother." I wanted to punch him, to tell him he was wrong, but something in his expression told me he was telling the truth. "How do you know this?" "My Thai girlfriend knows her. It's not exactly a secret among the locals. She's been working this same routine for over a year. University student with family problems, looking for foreign sponsors. She's quite good at it, apparently." I spent the rest of that day in a daze, David's words echoing in my mind. When Nim texted me that evening asking if we could meet because her mother needed money for medicine, I finally found the courage to confront her. "How many other men are you getting money from?" I asked her directly. The change in her demeanour was immediate and chilling. Gone was the sweet, struggling student I thought I knew. In her place was someone cold, calculating, and annoyed at being caught. "What other men?" she said, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Don't lie to me, Nim. I know about the others." She was quiet for a long moment, then shrugged. You want to help me. I let you help me. This is not so bad thing. But you told me you loved me, I said, hearing how pathetic I sounded. I never say this, she replied matter-of-factly. You say this, I just not say no. That night I went through my bank statements and calculated how much I'd given her over the past 6 months. The total was staggering. 340,000 baht, nearly £8,000. Money I'd saved for retirement, for the future I thought we'd share, gone. When I confronted her with the numbers, she became defensive, then angry. You old man, alone, sad about dead wife. I make you happy, you help my family. This is fair. I thought we had a relationship, I said weakly. We have relationship, she replied. You give money, I spend time with you. Very simple. She left that night and never contacted me again, but the humiliation wasn't over yet. 3 weeks after our last conversation, I ran into David again. He had more news I didn't want to hear. Nim had graduated and was already working as a tour guide in Bangkok, living with a Thai boyfriend she'd apparently been with throughout our entire relationship. The German pensioner had found out about the others too and caused a scene at her university. The American had gone back to the States, broke and bitter. I was just another mark in what was clearly a well-practiced operation. But here's what really disturbed me when I started thinking about it more deeply. This wasn't just about one girl taking advantage of lonely old men. There was something more systematic about how I'd been targeted, how perfectly she'd known exactly what to say and do to keep me hooked. I started doing research, talking to other expats, reading about romance scams online. What I discovered was far worse than just losing money to a pretty girl. I'd been part of something much bigger. The tutoring angle wasn't random. They specifically look for retired teachers, professors, people who miss having a sense of purpose and feel good about helping someone learn. The university student persona wasn't a coincidence either. They knew I'd relate to someone serious about education, someone who reminded me of my best students. Even the location where I met her was calculated. They watched the coffee shops near the university district, noting which older foreign men come in regularly, what they read, how they dress, whether they seem lonely or social. They build profiles before making first contact. The family emergencies weren't random either. Sick grandmothers, broken motorcycles, university fees. These are tested stories that work on Western guilt and our desire to be helpful. The photos, the tears, the timing of each request, it was all choreographed. What made it worse was realising how they'd studied my emotional patterns. The way Nim would pull back slightly whenever I got too comfortable, making me chase her attention. The way she'd time her affection to coincide with money requests. The way she'd make me feel special and needed right before presenting a new crisis. I wasn't just unlucky to meet a girl who turned out to be a scammer. I'd been deliberately chosen, researched and manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit a grieving widower's psychology. The morning messages, the photos from campus, the way she'd ask my advice about her future, all of it was designed to make me feel invested in her success, like I was mentoring someone who genuinely cared about my opinion. It played directly into my identity as a teacher and my need to feel useful again. Even the way our relationship progressed was calculated, starting with tutoring sessions that made me feel professional and appropriate, gradually shifting to personal conversations that made me feel trusted, then dinners that felt like dates but could be explained as cultural exchange. Finally, the domestic touches, the toothbrush and clothes at my apartment that made me feel like we were building a life together. Every step was designed to deepen my emotional investment while maintaining plausible deniability. If anyone had questioned our relationship early on, she could have truthfully said I was just her English tutor. By the time it became obvious what was happening, I was already in too deep to think clearly. I stayed in Thailand for another month, trying to process what had happened, before returning to Scotland with my tail between my legs. I'm living in Glasgow now, in a small flat that's all I can afford after liquidating most of my savings for my Thai adventure. The financial loss was significant, but the emotional damage was worse. For 6 months, I'd believed that someone cared about me again, that I had a future beyond grief and loneliness. Instead, I'd been nothing more than a convenient source of income for a young woman who was skilled at identifying and exploiting lonely older men. I keep thinking about the signs I ignored, the constant money requests, the way she'd changed the subject when I asked about her daily life, the fact that I never met any of her friends or classmates despite months of dating. But the biggest sign was how quickly she made me feel special, chosen, like I was saving her from desperate circumstances. Real relationships develop slowly, with mutual discovery and gradual trust building. Professional scammers make you feel immediately important to them because they need to establish emotional dependency as quickly as possible. The worst part is realising how predictable I was. A recently widowed man alone in a foreign country with money and a need to feel useful again. I might as well have worn a sign saying, "Easy target." I'm not bitter toward Nim, exactly. She was doing what she needed to do to survive and support her family. In her mind, I was getting companionship and she was getting financial help. It was a transaction, even if I didn't understand the terms. But I am angry at myself for being so naive, for letting loneliness cloud my judgment so completely. I'm angry that I didn't trust my instincts when things started feeling off. I'm angry that I was so desperate for connection that I mistook professional kindness for genuine affection. Most of all, I'm angry that I wasted the last good years of my life chasing something that was never real instead of properly processing my grief and figuring out how to build a meaningful life on my own. If you're listening to this and you're in a similar situation, recently divorced, widowed, or just lonely, please be more careful than I was. Real relationships develop slowly, without constant financial crises. Someone who genuinely cares about you won't see you primarily as a solution to their money problems. Take time to grieve properly. Don't try to fill the void left by loss with the first person who shows you kindness. The loneliness will pass, but the consequences of poor decisions made while lonely can last much longer. Keep your financial boundaries firm, no matter how compelling the sob stories become. If someone's interest in you seems directly proportional to your willingness to solve their financial problems, that's not love, that's business. And most importantly, don't make major life decisions while you're grieving. Don't move to foreign countries. Don't liquidate your savings. Don't make promises about the future until you've had time to process your loss properly. Thailand can be a wonderful place to start over, but it's not a magical cure for loneliness or grief. Those problems follow you wherever you go, and they make you vulnerable to people who know exactly how to exploit them. I'm 70 now, living on a modest pension, and I doubt I'll find love again. That's okay. I've learned that being alone is better than being used, and that genuine connection can't be purchased, no matter how much money you're willing to spend. The hardest lesson was accepting that Helen is gone, and no amount of money or miles travelled will bring her back. What I should have done was honour her memory by living well, not by running away and making myself vulnerable to people who saw my grief as an opportunity. If my story prevents even one person from making the same mistakes I did, then sharing this humiliation will have been worth it. Don't be like me. Don't let loneliness make you stupid. And remember, if something feels too good to be true, especially when you're vulnerable, it probably is.